Okay, so today's topic is EHS, which is environmental health and safety. Now, that is something that is a little confusing for many people. So, we first need to understand what it involves. So, it involves from a manufacturer or a business owner's point of view, the aspect of environment, health, and safety within his offices, factories, and in relation to all work and business they are doing. So mostly people think that EHS department is going to work on the environment and the utility laws. But EHS actually covers a little more. And in most manufacturing units, the EHS work will be split into three different departments. The EHS department, which works on the Environment, Boiler Act, Explosives Act, and all that. There is a there's a health related matters which is looked after primarily by the health officer and supervised or monitored by welfare officers, and in some cases the HR or ER department. Safety is unfortunately the thing which is paid least attention in many of the factories, and that comes under the safety officer, and in very few cases the safety officer is a part of the EHS department in their real setup. What are the things that EHS is supposed to do? They're supposed to look into the environmental compliance. They are supposed to look into the emergency preparedness response in case something goes wrong. They are supposed to look at occupational safety, which is safety on the shop floor, safety in the office, safety uh, in case of transportation related matters, safety of the people during the travel. Fire safety is now a very important segment. Occupational health, as we have already said, there in most factories now there is a requirement that they have to have a full-time doctor. I'm talking about large factories. In small factories, it is optional. Some people have it, some people don't. So what happens if you do not pay attention to EHS? First and most important is that there is a risk of injury, illness, and compensation that goes with it. In the Indian business scenario, personal injury is unfortunately not paid as much attention, but since there is a risk of having to pay compensation, then people look at what they're doing in terms of safety. There is a possibility of regulatory fines. Every act has it. Factories Act talks about 1 lakh rupees and up to 7 years in prison. Under the Environment Act, there is unlimited cost of cleanup apart from 6 months in jail and up to 1 lakh in fines, in some cases 2 lakhs in fines. Apart from that, for many of the companies now, the damage to reputation is a serious matter. The social media does not allow us to stay, you know, unworried about any of these things because the news spreads very fast and the news stays. Even if you follow the European law now, you can ask Google to remove references to your wrong things done after 15 years. Okay, even today, people, when they think of Union Carbide, they do not think that they made the most famous red colored batteries that was the mainstay of our households for years, for torches and everything. People only think about the accident in which 15,000 people in Bhopal died. Reputation damage stays for a long time. Property damage is also a real danger, although it is less in the list of risks, it is lower down. In some cases, this violation may result in accreditation loss. For example, if you are a hospital and you do not pay attention to certain regulatory risks on this, Okay, Mona Lisa, I was just asked by someone whether I'm on mute. Is everybody able to hear me? Just to confirm.
Yes, we are able to hear you.
Okay, okay. So I think that person has some problem with his system. Okay, thanks.
Yes. If you can just ask him to log in again, probably it's an issue from his end.
Okay, I'll just message him. Just give me a second.
Thank
So
you.
loss of accreditation is what we were talking about. So let's say you are a hospital. You have biomedical waste which is generated. There is an approval for it. If you do not follow the rules, you lose that, and then you can no longer run that hospital. There are certain associations, there are certain accreditation standards which say that if you are in violation of any of the local laws, then you lose this accreditation, and therefore you cannot sell to the customers who are buying based on that accreditation. The last part is, now that everything is digitalized and each department sees what everybody else has done, I mean, each government department has access to what everybody else has done. If you have violated the laws, you have been caught for it, you have been fined, you have been issued show cause notices, or if you are known to repeatedly violate the law, delay your new approvals for everything will be delayed months and months. Okay, because they will send you questions, they will send you things, they will refuse things which others have been given, just because they know that you are generally in default. So how do you make sure that EHS does its thing properly? So preparedness. Number one, SOPs is required and must be there. You have to train the people, you have to put in monitoring systems, and you have to have champions. This is a concept which has come from the Americans, basically. You have people who are trained in certain things and are told to continuously remind everybody else, and if anybody is not doing it right, escalate the matter. Then you need expert groups to look into or advise you on things which you are, as a HR person, as a finance person, as an audit person, not fully aware of. As per law, you have to compulsorily have an environment management cell if you are in orange or red zone in your environmental clearance. A safety committee is compulsory for all factories, but recommended even for uh, offices, and definitely for businesses like transportation fleets, delivery businesses, uh, people like Swiggy, Ola. Safety committee is important. You have to appoint safety officers when you reach a certain size. We'll cover that later. Welfare officers under factory law are a special set of people paid by the employer whose task is to make sure that the workers get their rights and are not at a disadvantage. Welfare officers and the training officers can be leveraged to make sure that the workers know what they should do, what they should not do, what they should report, and make sure also that they understand that following the environmental guidelines and the safety guidelines is for their benefit, and therefore automatically brings down your level of risks. Okay, environment is the first and the largest part of my presentation, so we'll start with that. The main law regarding environment in India is the Environment Protection Act, which is this third item in the middle. Okay, but in terms of the way the acts have evolved, the Air Prevention Act was passed first, then the Water Prevention Act was passed, then the government realized that it is not enough, and they passed a umbrella act called the Environment Protection Act. Then under this act, they have issued various rules. Advantage of the rules from the government point of view, does not need to be passed by the parliament or approved by the parliament each time there is a change. So hazardous chemical rules was the one of the first ones which was brought in on control of storage, manufacture, storage and import of hazardous chemicals all over the country. After that, the biomedical waste management rules came out, which has after that been revised 4 times. The latest one is of 2016, but was again amended in 2020 when the COVID protocols kicked in. Hazardous waste management rules. These were actually 3 rules which have now been merged into one. Controls how you will generate waste, how you will keep it, how you will dispose of it, and how you will keep records of it. Plastic waste management rules, everybody must have heard, because 4 years back, government of Maharashtra made a big noise about it in cutting plastics and put in a lot of and implemented a lot of these rules into real life. Unfortunately, this is tapered off at the moment, but the rules are still valid and must be followed if you don't want to risk fines, penalties, and even a shutdown. Battery management rules is a 2001 rule. A new one is coming in 2021. Everybody is waiting for it to be finally notified, because batteries are now there everywhere. It is there in your phones, it is there in your backup systems, it's there in your watches, it's there everywhere. And the manufacturer of the device has to take care of these batteries, and the new rules include a compulsory system of collecting old batteries from the users and recycling them. Noise pollution was a part of the of the Air Act. Now it has been put into a separate set of rules. And the last and the newest one is the e-waste management rules, which is unfortunately taken a very serious impact on our environment because of the growth in phones. When we were in college or slightly after that, 1 person in 10 had a mobile phone, and it was surprising. Now each person has got 2 or 3 phones in his pocket. And each of these things finally end up giving a huge amount of waste which has to be tackled. So there are rules that apply to it. The environment law requires you to take certain approvals. You can call it permits, you can call it approvals, the same. Number 1, before you start building a factory or before you start to set up a large office, in certain cases, you need a consent to establish. That you have to apply for, giving a lot of details, and the pollution control department of the state will issue a consent to establish. It has got a specific timeline within which the factory must be built or the office must be made ready. Once it is done, you need to apply for a consent to operate. You cannot actually start your office till you get that consent. But in real life, people do apply and immediately start on the hope that they will get it. And the departments have mostly been lax about any punishment on that, as long as whatever was there in the consent to establish has been strictly followed. Once you get your consent to operate, then you need to apply for hazardous waste authorization if you are generating any kind of hazardous waste. We think of hazardous waste as dangerous chemicals, but even if you have an effluent treatment plant or you have a sewage treatment plant, which is now required even for large offices, the final sludge which comes out of it is also called as hazardous waste. So don't only look for chemicals which you think are dangerous. One thing is that in the consent to operate, they will specify what hazardous waste you are allowed to generate, and you cannot generate or dispose anything beyond that. Hazardous waste authorization will only include those items which are in your consent to operate. The next item you need is a biomedical waste authorization. This is very important for hospitals, clinics, medical facilities. But since every factory today has a medical facility, it becomes obligatory for them also to take this biomedical waste authorization. Hazardous waste and e-waste recyclers have to be registered. In the same way, the plastic waste recyclers have to be registered, and the e-waste also you said. So why is these two important? You are most probably not in that business. You need to look at it, because if you sell your waste to a person who's not authorized, you are liable for whatever wrong happens. You can't say he told me. You have to go and verify. Now everything is moving to an online system. Most states now require your applications to be made online, and the approvals come and are visible online, so you can go and see what is your status. You can go and see the status of your suppliers. You can go and see the status of the agencies whom you're planning to sell the waste to. So that has made life easier, but it has also created a problem. You cannot get any backdated work because it's all electronically registered. Some of us are very happy about it, some people are not. Let's leave it at that. So what is the documentation that you need in terms of the Environmental Protection Act? Number one, the consent to establish and the consent to operate. You will get a consent under the Air Act, you will get a consent under the Water Act, you will get a consent under hazardous waste. They don't call the hazardous waste as a consent, they call it approval. And you will get one for all the other things that you wish to generate and dispose. Lately, over the last 5 years, more and more cases, the air and water consents are combined into one, and they write both in the same. So then you have only one consent to get from there. It's very important to renew the consent as stated. So if you get, some people get a 1 year, some get a 3 years, some get a 5 years. I have seen lately some people have even got a 10-year license, but that is very rare. Within at least 60 days prior to the consent expiring, you have to apply for renewal. In fact, you should give it before, because then if they have questions, you have enough time to respond to them. All waste that you generate, there has to be a record of what was generated, when it was generated, and when it was disposed of, and to whom. That is called Form 3. Form 3 is actually a register, that your register has to be in that format. So in Form 3, you do mostly, it is actually required for hazardous waste, but it is better to put all the waste in it. So when the department comes, they can see all of it. You might have a different register for each of the waste. You can have one combined register. You can have class wise. There is no restriction on that. There is no format specifically given, so you can choose your own format as long as it is properly recording and easy to read. Once in a year, you have to make an environmental audit report or an environmental impact report, which is in Form 5. It has to be submitted for each financial year by the 30th of September of the next year. And there is a hazardous waste return which has to be given by end of June for the financial year. You need to have water logbooks, which is a daily or hourly or once a shift record of how much water has been consumed. So these meters are put in the place where the water pipes enter your factories or your offices consumption system. You also need another logbook of how much has been let out into the effluent treatment plant or the sewage treatment plant, and what comes out of it in the end as clean water. Emission stacks are basically chimneys. So you have chimneys on your DG sets, you have chimney on your boiler. In some cases, if you have got furnaces as your manufacturing process, you have chimneys there. Each of these chimneys have to be recorded, I mean, has to be in your environmental consent and approval. Regular tests have to be done. So someone needs to make sure those records are kept of when it was taken, who has done the test, and what was the output that is there. Similarly, ambient noise testing is required. Let me clarify, it says ambient noise. So actually you're supposed to take the noise not on the shop floor, but the record of the noise outside the shop floor. The standard is to take it from 6 feet away from the outer wall of your factory shed. Where the noise levels inside the factory exceed a certain limit, because what people do is they also record the noise levels inside the shop on the shop floor. So wherever the noise levels are exceeding beyond that on the shop floor, you have to give them earplugs. If it is exceeding outside the factory, you need to put in muffling systems to make sure the noise does not go out. The noise levels, ambient noise levels outside of the factory measured 6 feet away from the shed should not exceed 75 decibels in the day and 70 decibels in the night. In certain areas, the local government has asked them, and they've done it, they've made it 60 decibels at night. Records must be kept at least once a week, if not daily, reviewed by the committee on a quarterly basis, and action taken on. Your effluent coming out from the effluent treatment or the sewage treatment has to be tested and cross-checked with the parameters that is allowed, both in the Green Tribunal standards as well as what is written in the consent given to you. One last point on this is, whenever you are sending any hazardous waste out of your factory, you are required to file a manifest in Form 13, which is multiple copies, multiple colors, one going with the truck, one going directly to the receiving station, one going to the government, one with you. But now, a few months ago, they have come up with the e-manifest system. Karnataka, for example, is one state where it is being put into effect. You do not need a manual Form 13. It is to be filed on the government site, which also means that the entire world knows what you are doing or what you are not doing. Okay, although this photo says radioactive, hazardous waste is much more widespread than just radioactive material. And unfortunately, people do not dress up the way this photo shows. But let's get back to the main thing. So hazardous waste that is generated should be sent to an actual user of that waste, if there is any, or to a authorized disposal facilities. Your employees who are handling it, whether they are in housekeeping, they are in the waste management cell, or even the workers doing the work from which the waste is generated, have to be trained properly and given the correct equipment and the proper information that is needed for their safety. Very important rule that is here: you cannot allow the waste, oh, I'm sorry, I think I did press that wrong. Okay. You cannot allow the waste to be in your factory for more than 90 days from the day that it is generated. In certain cases, you can get an approval for 180 days, but generally 90 days is the rule. If this is being exported, you need approval under Rule 14. Earlier, there were also regulations if it very strict regulations if it crosses a state border. Now that is diluted. You need detailed records to be maintained, reviewed by the committee on regular basis. Now, those who have their own treatment facilities, that has to follow the Central Pollution Control Board guidelines, and you need approval from the state. All the waste has to be packed in a manner that is safe to handle, store, and transport. There is a former client of ours who was fined a huge amount of money because it rained when the truck was going, and some of the hazardous material flowed out in the with the rainwater and got into the ground, into the soil next to the highway. So your transportation, your liability does not end when you give it to the transporter. Your liability ends when it reaches the waste management site. In case of cross border, you need NOC for transportation from both the states. If there's an accident, there's a form 11 that has to be sent immediately to the pollution control board. Some other points we have to always remember: compliance is strict, very, very, very strict, to be followed in letter and spirit. Okay, so you can't say that they didn't say that I have to keep it under a shade. I kept it in the open because it was not specified. Where the law basically says that you have to make sure it does not go out and get spilled, you should put it in a shade. It is the most logical thing to do. So it's not just the letter, but the spirit of the law. If you don't, our National Green Tribunal is becoming more and more like an activist, and they are happily looking at the spirit of the law and saying, sorry, you should have done it, you have caused a problem, now you pay. And the payment they ask for in terms of environmental cleanup is in crores. I have a book that is there, 78 pages of guidelines on how to decide how much is to be paid by the factory for any environmental damage. 78 pages of detailed instructions on how to compute. They are very serious about it now. Keep maximum records and evidence to show that you are compliant. They may suddenly come, check, and find that you are non-compliant. If you have records that you have been checking it over the whole period of many months, every week, every fortnight, whatever, it helps because you can show them that you are not always compliant. Something may have gone wrong on that day. And let me also tell you, there are sometimes sample mix-ups. The government lab has said 10,000 samples which have come, and some other factories sample gets mixed with you, and you are told, oh, you have violated XYZ, shut down your factory. At least these records which you have, you show them, the government department has some reason to say, okay, maybe there was a mistake, I will take another sample. All the terms of the consent, the consent terms goes into 4, 5, 6 pages. There is always an annexure 1 and an annexure 2. You need to read every line of it carefully and comply strictly. You can't say I forgot or I missed it. Sometimes these annexure 1, annexure 2 is not there. Just go there and get another copy, because without that you are in trouble. There are other natural and logical things you must do. For example, if something is wrong, you know you cannot do it, you need to immediately write a letter to them saying, I cannot do it. This is wrong. Please correct it. If you don't, you are liable. Okay. Petroleum Act is important because there are certain rules that you need to be aware of. PESO is Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization. It is a department of the central government. Petroleum Act says there are 3 classes of petroleum that is there. One is A, B, and C. A is a flash point of 23 degrees. So things like liquefied petroleum gas and all, which means it will catch fire at normal room temperature on a relatively cold day. Class B is up to 65 degrees. Okay, items like petrol, diesel, they're there in it. I think petrol is in class A. I don't remember. It's at a technical point. Class C is those which will catch fire at temperatures between 65 degree and 93 degrees. So furnace oil, LSHS, tar, these are all. Tar is above 993, does not come in it. So there are three classes. If you are storing more than 30 liters of class A, you need a license. If you're storing more than 15,000 liters of class B petrol, diesel, you need a license. If you're storing more than 45,000 liters of class C, you need a license. Without that, you can go to jail. If you have 29 liters of class A, you're still fine. Okay, if you all are wondering what this will be, a lot of places, ethanol is used for cleaning. Okay, ethanol is used for cleaning garments, it's used for cleaning parts of machinery. And because it is not easily available, people keep 100 liters of it on standby. It is a class A item. If you want to store more than 29 liters, you need to get a license or you will be in trouble. DG sets and power plants generally have a huge amount of diesel that is stored. People forget to take a license for it because they think this is only a small amount. It is not. You need to look at class A, class B. If you have a tank farm, now this is also something, one tank is not enough, so you have a number of tanks. All these tanks are mostly in a cluster. It's called a tank farm. If you have a tank farm, you need a retaining wall built around the tank farm to make sure that if there's a leak in a tank, that entire one must be enclosed or saved by the wall so it does not spill all over the factory. What other compliance you need? You need, if you're having class A, class B, or even class C items and are having a license, or even without a license, a full complete firefighting system is required. Everything from different types of fire extinguishers to even sand buckets. It's compulsory to have sand buckets in spite of everything else that you may have. And fully trained people capable of undertaking the firefighting in the correct manner. They should not go and use water hose in a oil fire, for example. Neither should they be standing right next to the fire when there is carbon dioxide being pumped into it, carbon dioxide foam being pumped into it. They will end up being hospitalized after some time. So the training is also a critical part of it. Storage tanks has to be designed as per the standards of the Act. If you do not have a license, you need to just follow the standards. If you need a license, the license will not be granted unless your storage tank is inspected and passed by the PESO officers. Other things that are connected with it, very logical, but still, no children, no intoxicated persons should be involved in loading or unloading or transportation of any of these items. No smoking, no matches or inflammable substance, especially during the weather of pipelines. Mobiles and electronics devices are actually capable of causing a spark. In a high fume environment like this, it is to be avoided. It has to be enforced. And of course, you cannot have a fire next to a petroleum storage, except in case of DG set or a furnace which is being fed by that same stored petroleum. Explosives again comes under the same PESO. There are 7 classes of explosives for which you need license and follow the rules. You can see them here on the screen. And then they have issued rules, because the act cannot cover everything. The rules, and these rules are updated from time to time. Which rules apply to you? Okay, item number 3 is not actually a rule that way, it's only the fees. Which one applies to you? You will know based on what work you do. It's item number 4, gas cylinder rules, is the one which applies to almost everybody and people miss it out. So I will go a little more into that. Okay, before that, important points: you need to get your license if you are using explosives. You need to renew it on time. All terms of the license must be very, very, very correctly followed. Storage rules, again, it is there. Access control, who can go, who cannot go, and what are you doing to prevent an unauthorized person from going. You will be surprised to know the number of cases where our teams have found workers hiding in a cluster of storage tanks to smoke a BD because it is not allowed in the factory. Okay, so the most logical thing is not to smoke it next to the diesel tank, but that is where they feel no one will see them. So access control on that place is very important. At the same time, your access control should not be in such a way to hamper a firefighting effort. So if you have put a fence and a lock and there's a fire and they cannot find the key, believe me, you are going to get hauled up straight probably into jail. So this needs to be accessed, this needs to be assessed on a very, very cool-headed manner by experts who know what they are talking about. At the same time, you need another rational person who sees it from a common sense point of view. Trained personnel only for handling these things, and a qualified safety officer. So you have safety officers under Factories Act, you have safety officers under other laws, but the qualification of safety officers is specified by PESO for all these activities, and that overrides what is there in the other. So you can't say that this person has got safety training from University of X and therefore I'm putting him there, when the law says that he must have passed a petrochemicals degree or something equivalent which they have specified. Unfortunately, HR will try and push the person whom they found rather than the person necessarily required, because that person may be difficult to get and very expensive. So a compliance officer, a business owner, an occupier has to put his foot down on this matter and say, no, we will strictly follow the letter and spirit of the law. Gas cylinders, since people miss it and do not know it, I will go a little more into details. LPG, you need a license if you've got 100 kgs. So if you have the normal 14-liter cylinders, you can have 5 of them, not the 6, without a license. If you have these tall ones, industrial level, you can have only 3 of them. So you need to make sure you don't exceed the limit in kgs. In case of inflammable non-toxic gases, 25 cylinders or 200 kgs, whichever lower. So these all toxic gases, more than 5 cylinders, you will need a license before you can. Now again, remember, this is license to possess. Okay, this point has been changed 6-7 times in the past. Now we've come back. Originally they said license to use, license to store. So people said, when I am using it, I'm not storing it. Then there was a fight about what happened to the empty cylinders. Now the rule is very, very clear. This is license to possess. You cannot possess more than 100 kgs of gas, or 5. You cannot possess more than 5 cylinders of gas. So don't let somebody fool you into violating the law. It's very normal, logical, cool and dry place, away from boiler, away from heat store, fire resistant storage. They are to be stacked vertically, never horizontally, one on top of the other. Inflammable and toxic gases to be kept separately. Empty cylinders to be segregated from filled ones. Everybody says, why, I don't need to. The law says, just do it. There is a deep reason for it, which will probably take an expert 3 hours to explain. Let's not get into that. Ensure all valves are tightly shut. So it is now a SOP in many of the large factories that the safety officer will once a week take a technician who will go and check the valves. There are transportation rules. You need to make sure they are followed if you are the person who's transporting it. There is a very strict procedure on how delivery is to be taken. There is a procedure for handling and storage. For example, you cannot roll an LPG cylinder. If you cannot pick it up by hand, you should have a trolley. You cannot roll them like what we see people doing. Only train people to handle these things. Again, very natural. Peso related accidents do happen. So there is a procedure. You need to notify the accident to the chief controller of the state. They say fax, email, or telegram. I think email and a phone call is a better method in the current thing. A written report has to go to PESO within 24 hours. As soon as the accident happens, you have to notify the district magistrate and the nearest police station. District magistrate, because he is responsible for safety of the people around the area. Okay, so we have talked a lot about what the EHS department does. Now let's come back to what is there on the other thing. Health and safety. Health and safety mostly is covered under Factories Act and the Shop and Establishments Act. Okay, so this is what the Factories Act says. A very similar thing is there in Shop and Establishment Act. The occupier is a director who is responsible for that factory. So he is liable. He is required to make sure that the safety is handled and properly done. People are trained. All working conditions are safe. Safe access to the place of work, and monitor the health risks. In terms of health, very, very standard. Clean premises, disposal of waste, proper temperature, avoid dust and fumes, sufficient drinking water, enough of toilets. Okay, under the welfare rules, two items which stand up because they're a part of safety and therefore EHS. One is first aid, one box in every department and one box for every 150 workers, and people adequately trained in first aid. These are two very important things. I'm not saying the rest is not important, but we are talking about safety. These 2 points stand up. More on safety. Dangerous machines should be fenced so no one can accidentally go and put his hand in it. In case the workers are repairing any machine which has not been shut down, special procedures and equipment for them. No young person. Young person means below 18. Hoists, lifting equipment, chains, ropes, tackles, they have to be checked and tested regularly. Compulsory mandatory inspection by external agency once in a year. Pressure vessels, which is boilers, compressors, there's a separate testing protocol. Some of them is to be done every 6 months, some of them once a year, some specific things has to be checked every 2 years. Personal protection equipment must be given, so the safety committee has to decide who will wear a helmet compulsorily, who will wear a boiler jacket, boiler suit, who will be given an apron, who has to wear specific shoes. who needs masks, who needs earplugs. Other things are, okay, fire prevention methods, maintenance of the buildings, general safety. If you have any dangerous process or hazardous process or dangerous operations, you need to have these things. You need to have a full-time medical officer. Each worker has to be medically examined every 6 months, and those records must be given to the workers. All exposure records have to be given. Occupational health centers must explain and train all this thing, and an ambulance van is compulsory. If an accident happens, you need to inform the inspector. Under the labor laws, you need to inform the ESIC. If it is a death, you need to send notice within 12 hours. There are registers to be maintained. Now, out of this, there is one thing written here you can see. It's called a CAPA form. CAPA form is a corrective action and preventive action form. This is not under the Indian laws. This has been adopted by most companies from OSHA's, which is a American law, an American standard. Okay, so this is needed. I will explain it a little later on this. So this you need to do. So you need to know where the accidents have happened or could have happened and what preventive action needs to be taken, because accidents, all told, are an expensive affair. Where the same accident has happened or the similar type, the safety committee needs to go and look at it and take some action to make sure that, to basically mitigate your risk. Near miss again is not there under the Indian laws. It is basically where an accident could have happened, but by luck did not happen, or somebody's alertness prevented it from happening. Again, this comes from OSHA's. So you need to first of all tell people that they need to report near miss. It is a critical thing. You need to also tell them that it is not their fault, or they will not be punished for whatever happened in the near miss. And then you need to sensitize all the workers, supervisors, and the floor managers of the near miss, how it happened, and what needs to be done to prevent it from happening. The safety officer takes the first step and then reports to the safety committee of all cases where near misses have happened and what action they have done to prevent it. The safety committee is supposed to correct the safety officer's action if it is not right. This is ignored by many of the people, but it needs to be done. Lately, a new line of thought has come into safety. It is called industrial hygiene. They are not talking about cleanliness, but the concept of industrial hygiene is steps which you take to make the things safe in a natural way. So it is an application of scientific principles in the workspace and a more scientific approach to safety and occupational diseases. Okay, so it talks about taking experts from various scientific backgrounds and get them to look at the safety and approach it from a completely different point of view. Originally, this started with European companies looking at repeated exposure from chemicals which had toxic impact on the workers. All told, Europeans are the most conscious about safety and worker rights. So now they look at 6 steps in it, out of which the first 3 is the one which people generally call as industrial hygiene. Identification of health hazards, evaluation of those health hazards, and control of those health hazards. Next 3 parts: record keeping, so that you know what has happened; training of the employees, so they know what to do, what to avoid; and a periodic review of the entire program, its efficacy, its success, and what else needs to be done to make it better. What's the scope? Number one, recognize, evaluate, and control the hazards or the agents of hazards. That's the first step. If you don't recognize it, you don't accept that this is a problem or could create a problem, then the entire exercise is a waste. Then you are doing it only for doing the paperwork. That is of no use. There are better things to spend your time on. What are these agents? Dust, mist, fumes, vapor, and gases. So wherever these is present as a part of your manufacturing process, you need to look at those, study it, and see whether it is a hazard and how you can control it. For example, if you have an acid wash process, you cannot say I will not have fumes from it. So do you have a way to do it? Yes, probably you can put a high powered exhaust fan on the top and collect it and send it out. Maybe you can give everybody gas masks and put it. Maybe you will give them special dresses, but you cannot ignore the fact that those fumes or those vapors are coming out, or that they are dangerous to the people. Apart from that, there are physical agents of hazards. Ionizing, non-ionizing radiation, noise, vibration, temperature. So if you are working in a environment which has got drills running on a continuous basis, okay, that the noise and the vibrations coming of it is a hazard for the workers, and that is an agent of the hazard. Biological agent, yes, insects, mold, yeast, bacteria, viruses, we know this, but in some cases people ignore it, thinking हाँ ये तो हर एक जगह पे होता है, moisture है, there will be molds. Okay. Economic agents, this was not looked at any time seriously before. Monotony of work, fatigue from and effect of repetitive motion, which leads to people ignoring the safety because it's like what is happening today. COVID hai, theek hai, but I've been wearing mask for the last 3 years, last 1.5 years, 2 years. What difference it'll make? I will take it off. Okay, so repetitive motions, repetitive actions, people get fed up of it and start to ignore their own health or their risks. So you need to recognize that these ergonomic, sorry, I said economic by mistake last time. These ergonomic agents have to be looked at and seriously tackled. Controls, engineering controls, change your equipment design and process, substitute non-hazardous materials for hazardous material wherever possible. If you cannot come with completely non-hazardous material, look for less hazardous material. Even a little safety is better than no safety. Administrative controls, reduce the exposure by change in procedure, work area access, worker rotation. Worker rotation is something most factory managers will be against because it reduces the learning curve and the person coming back has to relearn, and that affects his efficiency. But if you are serious about industrial hygiene, then you need to actually take a look and say, where do you draw the line or where do you balance? Personal protective equipment, ear muffs, ear plugs, safety glasses, goggles, respirators, gloves. Do you use ear plugs or ear muffs? Do you give them goggles or do you give them safety glasses? These are things which the expert committees have to give you the data to make a call, which is why the first part we started by saying, when you look at this particular segment, you need experts from various scientific backgrounds. So what are the measures? How do you evaluate the hazard? This is one important step. Measurement, sampling, noise meters, light meters, These we we have heard of. Some of them are now apps. Some of them are specialized equipment. Calculation of dose and the level of the dose and the duration of the exposure is a very important thing now. Why is it important? Let me give an example. Let's say noise and the vibrations. If any of you all have been to a foundry, okay, the normal level of noise is about 75, 80 decibels. Every 10 minutes, a huge 10-ton hammer will come and hit something, and a massive amount of noise goes out. Okay, so when you are looking at the level of noise, you're looking at 85 with spikes of 170, 180 every 10 minutes. Compare that with somebody who's sitting with a drilling machine, and this noise level of 120, 130 decibel is there all the time, the entire time of his work. So calculation of the dose, similar with fumes, quantity of fumes, duration of fumes, strength of the chemicals in the fumes, you need to calculate the dose. Why do you need to calculate the dose? Because the rest and the rotation you will give or the equipment you will give differs. A person who is using the drill will need to have noise cancellation headphones, ear muffs, and every 1 hour he should probably be taken off the work. Every half an hour he should be taken off the work and given a 20-minute rest while someone else takes a shift. But when the person is in a foundry and that 170, 150 decibel noise is coming once in 10 minutes, his ability to take that dose and work, maybe he can work for 3 hours before he needs a break. I am giving you random numbers. Please don't take this as gospel. It is the qualified people who will give you this. I'm just explaining why the calculation of the dose is important. Record keeping, because it's only based on the records and the data that your experts will be able to tell you where you stand and what changes you need further. Of course, one important point here is we will all in the end come down to a balancing act. What level of additional cost can I have in this to save my workers? What it is worth to me, I will not comment on, because that is a big debatable matter. European countries, workers come at a premium because otherwise they will not work. The states supports them. Here, that is less of a problem. But if you have people who are trained in a specific activity and whom you have spent a lot of efforts in getting to your level of requirement, these make a lot of difference. You don't want to lose that person. You don't want him to walk out. You don't want him to find a job that is less stressful to him, or his family forces him to give it up because they don't like the exposure he's having. So slowly the balancing, the cost benefit analysis is changing even in India. If you are at the crest of the process, you are better off. So you should know this, you should learn this, you should try it out to see what can be done. I think we are somewhere at the last of it. This is an important thing. The hazard communication is a very critical part of the concept of industrial hygiene. Not only you should know, you should communicate to the workers that this is a problem, this is dangerous, and this is your risk. You should not think that just when you tell them they will not work. No, they will still do the work, but at least they will be more careful. Okay, or it will be an informed risk they are taking, which is better. So 3 ways of hazard communication: container labeling, employee training, and what is called MSDS, material data safety sheets. Okay, I am assuming people have heard of material safety data sheets. I don't have a copy with me that I've shown you. They're basically what the manufacturer of the material issues, saying this is what this item is, this is what it consists of, this is the risk. So if it is toxic, it is toxic if taken orally, but not a problem if you touch it, as long as that hand doesn't touch your mouth. Whether it is toxic, whether when it is inhaled, whether it is dangerous if it touches your eyes and nose, and in each case, what is the action to be taken in counter? That is MSDS. Why is MSDS important? It must be made available to the workers so that they can also see and they can also know, just not believing what the trainer says. Again, European countries, American workers, they will look at the MSDS, or some of them will look at the MSDS. In India, the worker will say, क्या उसमें समझ में आएगा, छोड़. Who will read 8 pages? Anyway, the manager will shout if I don't do the work. But MSDS is a very critical part of the communication process. So we come to this point on industrial hygiene management. So first you need to list the hazardous materials. You need to describe your labeling system. You take the standard labeling system. If you look at all of these are standard. This means danger of fire. This is danger. This is corrosive material. Okay, so you can use those or you can come up with your own. You come up with your own, you must make sure that what your labeling system is communicated to the workers. It is communicated to visitors. It's communicated to every new person who joins your company. Where are the MSDS kept so anyone can go and read? Okay. Information for non-routine hazards. So routine hazards, everybody knows, they already know ye hota hai. Non-routine, one-off hazards must be explained. A detailed training program, very, very critical. Are the contract workers informed of the hazards? Who is doing it? How is it doing it? How effective it is? Because your own people may not make a mistake, but your contract workers make a mistake, and the impact will be just as bad. And this documentation must be available to their employees and the employees representative, which means the unions. The concept here is assuming that the unions are constructive partners in your industrial process and not there just to pick every bone that they can get. So that is basically what we had to cover.